The window in Nora Beale's workroom faced east, and in the autumn of 1880, when the sun was still 2 hours past the ridge, when she threaded her first needle of the morning, she worked by lamplight until she didn't need it anymore. That was the rule she gave herself, not because she couldn't spare the oil, but because discipline was the one thing that still belonged entirely to her, and she had learned to guard it. She had a good table, solid and level, bought off the Widow Marsh for $4 when she first arrived in Saddle Creek, Wyoming Territory, and it was the best $4 she'd spent since crossing the territory line. Her scissors lay on the right side in order size, the good shears first, then the smaller snips, the way a surgeon sets out his instruments before he begins. Her spools ran along the windowsill from red to blue to brown, and into the greens, a habit from her mother, who had said that a woman who could find her thread in the dark was a woman prepared for anything. She was 29 years old. She had been in Saddle Creek for just over 2 months. She had 12 customers, and she had no intention of having fewer. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me when the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The number had been 14 when September started. 2 of them, Mrs. Arleth Birch and her daughter, had moved their business to the dressmaker over in Kettle Fork, which was 7 miles east and charged less per hem. Nora heard about it on a Wednesday, spent 10 minutes turning it over, and went back to her needle. You could not spend more than 10 minutes on a thing you couldn't change, or you'd spend your life standing still. The work that remained was steady, if not generous. She repaired shirts and mended trousers for the Colton family, whose 3 boys were hard on their clothes from earliest morning to last light. She hemmed dresses for the women of Saddle Creek, who could afford new fabric but not a full dressmaker's rate. She repaired saddlebag leathers for old Pete Harlow at delivery, who never once said thank you but paid on time and never argued about price, and whose expression when he collected his work was as close to gratitude as the man apparently managed. She did fine needlework for Mrs. Vera Tyndall of the dry goods, the delicate kind that took patience and a good eye, and for which Mrs. Tyndall paid fairly, but watched Nora the whole time she was in the shop, with the attention of a woman who has decided something about a person and is looking for evidence to confirm it. Nora noticed the watching. She said nothing. She had learned, in the years since her husband Thomas died, and in the 2 months she had been building something here from what was left, that the most effective thing a woman in her situation could do was decline to justify herself. She did the work. She charged an honest price. She kept her room above the Dooley building clean, and her table in order, and her 12 customers as satisfied as 12 very different people could be. She kept a ledger, 1 column for what came in and 1 for what went out, checked against each other twice, the way a careful person checks a work. The numbers were not bad. They were not good. They were a rope she could hold, frayed in places and sound in others, and she held it. On Tuesday, she went to Ed Greer's general store to settle her weekly accounts and buy what the workroom needed: coffee, lamp oil, thread when she was running low, sometimes bread from the counter if she hadn't had time to bake, and the Widow Marsh wasn't offering. She was specific at the store about what she needed, firm about not being talked into what she didn't, and efficient enough about it that Ed Greer had told his wife she was the best customer he had, which she took as a professional compliment it was meant to be. She had been in Saddle Creek 63 days. On the Tuesday morning she met Gideon Cross, though she did not know his name then, and would not have known what to do with it even if she had. The Cross Canyon Ranch sat 4 miles north of Saddle Creek, on a broad bench above the creek of the same name. 480 acres of good mixed grass and open timber, with a creek through the lower pasture that had not run dry in the 7 years Gideon Cross had worked it, which was more than most ranchers in that country could say about their water. He had built the main house in the spring of 1872, the year he and Clara came out from Nebraska. It was a good house, square and solid, with a covered porch on the south face and windows spaced evenly. Nothing ornamental. Everything well made, built to last, built for 2. Clara died in the winter of 1874. Her horse went down on the icy track coming back from the Hollowell place, where she had ridden to bring a pot of broth to the neighbor's sick child. The horse got back to his feet and came home. Clara did not. Gideon found her at the base of the creek bank when the snow started coming in hard that evening, and she was already past what a man could do by then. She was 26 years old. She had been going to help a sick child, because that was the kind of woman she was, and the ice on the track had not cared. He did not talk about it after that. He ran the ranch. He did it well, and it was better every year for the work he put into it. He paid his debts and kept his word, and employed two hands, Roy Danker and old Pete Mack, and gave them fair wages and did not expect them to work on Sundays if the cattle didn't require it. The town of Saddle Creek knew him as a solid man and left him to it. He came to town on Tuesdays for supplies and mail. He was civil to everyone he encountered. Nobody pushed past civil with him, because he gave off the particular quality of a man who had arranged his life with care and had no desire to have it rearranged. He was 44 years old. He had not slept a full night through in 7 years, though nobody in Saddle Creek knew that. He had been cold inside for so long. He had stopped registering it, the way you stop registering the sound of the wind when it has been constant long enough. He came into Ed Greer's on a Tuesday in the second week of October with a list in his coat pocket. Coffee, lamp oil, 50 pounds of flour, a box of rifle cartridges, 3 coils of good fencing wire for the east fence that Roy had been asking about since August. He had a pack horse tied outside and intended to be in and out in under 20 minutes. He had been coming to Greer's on Tuesdays for 7 years and had always been in and out in under 20 minutes. He was at the back of the store, waiting for Ed to finish with the woman at the counter. She was going through her purse, not frantically, not with any distress showing on her face. She went through it with the precise and careful attention of a person who already knows what number is in there and is confirming it one more time before committing to a transaction. She had thread on the counter and 2 spools of interfacing. She was dressed neatly in a plain gray dress and a coat that was good but had been turned at the hem sometime in the past year. Her hair was dark, pinned up in the practical way of a woman who has work ahead of her. Ed said something to her. She counted out her coins, exact to the cent, slid them across the counter. She picked up her thread and turned toward the door. At the edge of the counter, she paused. Ed kept a tin of crackers there, the plain, dry kind, for customers who had come a distance and needed something before the ride back. She looked at the tin, not idly. She looked at it for 1 beat too long, the way a person looks at something they want and have decided they do not need. Then she straightened and moved for the door. Gideon had seen that particular look before. He had made that exact calculation himself. In the first bad year after Clara, when the ranch had not yet become what it would become, and there had been days he kept going on coffee and the habit of not admitting to weakness. He recognized the shape of it clearly, a person looking at food and deciding they don't need it, when the actual answer is something else. She was at the door. "You haven't eaten today," he said. She stopped. She turned around slowly. Her face moved through surprise and then settled into something careful and composed. He was not looking at her with pity. He had not said it with pity. He said it the way he said most things in his life, the way a man says a fact about the weather or the condition of a fence. He had observed something and named it. That was all there was to it. "I'm fine, thank you," she said. He crossed to the counter. He set a coin down beside the cracker tin. "Take what you need." He set it over his shoulder, already turned to look for Ed Greer, and he did not stand there to watch. What she did, she stood in the doorway for a moment. Then she crossed back to the counter and opened the tin and took 3 crackers and put them in the pocket of her coat, and she walked out the door without saying another word. He got his flour and his wire and his lamp oil and rode north to the ranch. He thought about the east fence and the new post it would need. He thought about the heifer, who had been off her feed since Thursday. He thought about the letter from his brother Daniel in Nebraska, sitting unopened on the kitchen table for 9 days, which he had been meaning to read. He did not think about the woman at the cracker tin. But when Ed Greer, as Gideon was loading the pack horse, asked whether he had met Nora Beale, the seamstress from out of the Dewey building on the east side, and Gideon said he hadn't, Ed looked at him for a moment with the sideways look of a man who has filed something and isn't going to say what. Gideon did not ask. He rode home and fed the off-feed heifer by hand from the bucket and did not think much more about it. Nora ate the crackers on the walk back, standing at the foot of the outside stairs of the Dewey building, looking across the back lot toward the creek where the cottonwoods had gone yellow and the air smelled of the coming cold. She chewed slowly. She had not asked for the man's kindness, and she had not thanked him for it. And both of those facts sat with her differently than she had expected. In 2 months in Saddle Creek, she had been working carefully to be unremarkable. A woman who did her work and kept her accounts and caused nobody inconvenience. In one exchange that had lasted less than 2 minutes, she had been read by a stranger as precisely as if she had announced herself. And the fact that he had said nothing pointed or unkind about what he observed did not entirely settle the discomfort. She did not know his name that day. She found it out from the widow Marsh that evening when she went to return a hem gauge she had borrowed. Gideon Cross, the widow said when Nora described the man. The dark coat, the unhurried way he stood, the flat, careful voice. From the ranch north of town. His wife died years back. The horse fell on the ice on the way back from a neighbor's. She said it with the way of a fact that was also still a sorrow. He's a decent man, keeps himself to himself. Nora thanked her and went home. She sat down at her table. She picked up her needle. For 10 minutes she accomplished very little. Then she found her place on the seam she had been closing before she went out, and the rhythm came back, and she worked until the lamp needed trimming. She thought about the crackers. Not the crackers themselves, which had been plain and not particularly good, but the way he had set the coin down and said, "Take what you need," without watching to see if she would. No performance in it. No expectation of thanks. Just a man who had noticed a thing and done what seemed to him like the sensible response, and then gone about his business. She put the needle back in the cloth and kept working. He came back the following Tuesday. She was not in the general store. She was across the street at Mrs. Tyndall's dry goods, finishing buttonholes on a wool jacket that Mrs. Tyndall had been requesting since the first week of October. Through the window, she watched him tie his horse at the hitch rail outside Ed Greer's and recognized him by the way he moved. That same unhurried quality. A man who has been doing physical work long enough that his body has stopped making a performance of it. Mrs. Tyndall said from her counter, "That's the Cross Canyon man. He's in every Tuesday." She said it with the tone of someone providing information that had not been requested. Nora finished her buttonhole. She said nothing. He did not come into the dry goods that day. She watched him go into Ed Greer's and come out 20 minutes later with his order loaded and ride north. The third Tuesday he did come in. He needed a whetstone and a pair of work gloves. He was at the long counter when Nora came out of the back room carrying a skirt that needed a hem let out. She stopped in the doorway. He turned his head and looked at her. He nodded once. She nodded back. She went to the cutting table and spread the skirt out and started measuring. He collected his gloves and his whetstone. On his way to the door, he stopped at the cutting table. He stood at a polite distance and looked at the work, the pin she had set, the line of the hem she was marking. "How's business going?" he said. "Steadily." Not quite true, not quite a lie. He looked at the skirt a moment longer. "You do good work," he said. She had not asked for the opinion, but he said it the way he said the other thing, as a plain statement of fact, with nothing expected back. "Thank you," she said. He left. Behind her, Mrs. Tyndall watched the door for a moment and then watched Nora, and Nora kept her eyes on the skirt and her pins where they needed to be. After that, he was there most Tuesdays when she happened to be in one of the 2 stores he used. He did not seek her out or change his route to find her, but when they were in the same room, he stopped. They talked about the weather, the roads, whether the North Pass had closed yet, the condition of the fall range, small things, nothing that cost either of them much. She noted on Tuesday mornings whether she had finishing work due at the dry goods or the general store. She did not examine this too closely. In the 3rd week of October, Roy Danker's wife June sent word through the widow Marsh that there were 4 work shirts needing repair and a riding coat with a pulled lining at the shoulder seams, and would Nora be willing to come out to Cross Canyon to collect them? Since Roy was particular about his shirts going through town after a remark the hardware man had made last spring about the state of his collar. Nora did not ask about the remark. She rode out on a Friday morning on the livery's gray horse, a compact animal who respected direction, and made the 4 miles north in good time. The house was bigger than she expected for one man alone. Square and solid, porch on the south side, windows even and well placed. It had been built with clear intention and maintained without any warmth. The good porch bench stood at the south end with a faded oilcloth on the table beside it. The south window curtains were drawn even though the October morning was bright, and the house could have used the light. June Danker met her at the side door with the manner of a woman who notices things and keeps most of what she notices to herself. She walked Nora through the kitchen. Clean. Nothing on the counters that wasn't strictly useful. A blue enamel coffee pot on the back of the stove. 2 cups on the shelf above it. Just 2, spaced evenly, like the remaining members of a set that used to be larger. The kitchen had the quality of a room that had been carefully maintained without being inhabited. Nora had grown up in a house like that after her mother died, and she recognized what it meant. It meant a person going through the motions of a life without quite being in it. She sat at the long table in the back room with the 4 shirts, and June left her to it, and she worked through the morning with the sound of the ranch outside, Roy's voice somewhere near the barn, the occasional clank of something metal, the particular silence that working land has between its sounds. He came in just before noon, his boots on the porch first, then the door, and then he was in the kitchen doorway looking at her with the same steady absence of surprise that seemed to be simply his natural way. "June said you were coming," he said. 4 shirts and the coat. He crossed the stove and poured coffee from the blue pot. He stood at the counter with his coat still on, drinking it the way a man stands at a counter when he has been standing there alone for long enough that he no longer thinks about pulling out a chair. She looked up from the 3rd shirt. "You might as well sit down." He looked at her. He looked at the chair. He sat. She had not planned to say it. She couldn't have explained exactly what made her, but the standing at the counter had the quality of a man who had simply forgotten there was a table and it seemed unnecessary to watch. They sat for a while, her working and him drinking his coffee, and neither of them needed to fill the quiet. Roy was somewhere near the barn, talking to Pete about a stuck gate latch. The stove settled into its slow afternoon tick. The light moved across the kitchen floor as the morning came on. "Clara picked that coffee pot," he said, at some point. She looked up. "My wife," she sent away for it from a catalog, said she was tired of drinking out of the beat-up tin one we came out from Nebraska with. His voice was even, the way a man's voice goes when he said something so many times in his own head that saying aloud feels smaller than he expected. Seemed unnecessary to me at the time. Nora looked at the pot. A good enamel pot, the deep blue of a clear sky, on a cold morning. The kind of thing a woman orders because she wants her kitchen to have more life in it. She was right. Nora said. He drank his coffee. She usually was. They left it there with the way it deserved. She finished the 4th shirt and moved to the riding coat. He got up and washed his cup and put it back on the shelf and went outside. She heard the barn door and his voice saying something to Roy about the east fence posts, and then the yard was quiet again. She looked at the cup on the shelf, placed back in its exact position, and then she turned back to the coat and checked the lining seams and pulled out her shears and did what the work called for. An hour later, when she was finishing the shoulder and could see clearly what the sleeves needed, she did the cuffs too, because they needed it and because it was the right thing to do. She delivered the finished shirts and coat to June the following week on a Tuesday, and June paid her the full rate and then said, with the directness of a woman who gives information plainly and lets other people decide what it means, that the boss had looked the coat over at supper and said the work on the cuffs was above what had been asked for, and that Roy had agreed, which in June's experience was more words than he usually put together on a single subject. Nora thanked her and said to send word if they had more work. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. She rode back to Saddle Creek on the gray livery horse and watched the mountains to the west, which had taken on their full October look, the aspen yellow and the pine going deeper where the sky went pale. She had been in Wyoming Territory 3 months now, and it was the first time she had stopped to look at the mountains just to look at them, without tallying what the day had cost and what remained on the table. She noted this fact about herself and put it with the others. The conversation shifted as October turned to November, and the cold came in off the ridge. They still talked in Ed Greer's, still talked to the dry goods counter, but the subjects were no longer only the roads and the weather. He told her about the east pasture and the fencing rotation he intended for spring, the way the grass grazed differently in sections, and how separating the lower bench from the upper creek ground would let each recover properly. She told him about the pair of ancient leather gloves she had been asked to repair for a man over in Kettle Fork. Gloves so old the leather had gone stiff as board, whose owner refused to replace them on the grounds that they had been his father's. "That makes sense," Gideon said. "It makes some sense," she said. Something moved in his expression that was not quite a smile, but was related to one. She asked him one Tuesday, standing at the back counter in Ed Greer's while Ed pulled his order from the storeroom, what his wife's name had been. She asked it plainly, without softening it into something else, because she had noticed he sometimes started to say things about Clara and stopped himself before he reached the name, and stopping at the name was its own kind of grief. He looked at her. "Clara," he said. "Clara Ames, before we married." He said the name the way you say the name of someone who mattered, plainly and with care, giving it the full weight of what it was. Clara Ames Cross. "How long were you married?" she said. 2 years and 4 months. He was quiet for a moment. He looked at a point somewhere past her left shoulder, not at anything in the room. She was going to help a sick child. A neighbor boy had a fever. She took the spotted horse because he was faster. A pause. "I've thought about that. What would have been different if the bay had been in the near pen instead?" Nora said nothing. He looked back at her. The creek bank was iced over. He couldn't keep his feet. She was the kind of person who goes to help a sick child, Nora said. He held her gaze. That means something about who she was. That she went. That she would have gone any morning, in any weather, regardless of the track. Nora looked at him steadily. That kind of person is worth the grief. He was still for a long moment. "That's the second time you've said something like that to me," he said, "because it keeps being true." Ed came back with the last of the order. The conversation moved where conversations in stores move when a third person arrives, toward weights and prices and the state of the road. But she thought about it on the walk home. She thought about Clara Ames, who had gone to help a sick child, and the man she had left behind who stood at kitchen counters instead of sitting at tables and had not pulled the south curtains open in 7 years. In the middle of November, Vera Tyndall came into Ed Greer's general store on a Saturday morning, which was not her usual day. She arrived when Gideon was there collecting an order that had come late from Cheyenne, and she waited until it was occupied in the back, and then she spoke to him with the pleasant and deliberate manner of a woman delivering something wrapped very carefully. She said she hoped he was keeping well. She said the cold had come in hard this year. She said she was sure Cross Canyon was running smoothly as always. And then she said she hoped he was being careful about giving too much of his attention to women nobody in Saddle Creek knew much about, because a man of his standing was noticed, and she would hate to see his reputation complicated by an attachment that hadn't had time to prove itself. She said it kindly, which was the precise instrument of it. Gideon looked at her for a moment. His expression did not change. "Nora Beale does honest work, and I've never heard anyone in this town say different," he said. Vera Tyndall agreed that she was sure he was right. She bought her needles and went home. Gideon finished his order and rode back to the ranch and said nothing more about it. But in the 2 weeks following, 3 of Nora's customers stopped coming. No announcement, no explanation. Mrs. Harwell sent a note saying she would be managing her own mending for a while. The Colton family's account went quiet. The land agent's wife simply stopped appearing on appointment days. 9 customers. Nora sat with her ledger for a long time on a Thursday evening. The rope had gotten thinner. She counted what she had and what was coming in and what November and December would cost, and the numbers told her what she did not want to hear. She could not be certain of the cause, not absolutely, but she had been in enough small towns to recognize the shape of a current that has been redirected. She had made no enemies in Saddle Creek. She had done nothing wrong. And yet, she did not tell Gideon. She did not spread her troubles. She had managed worse and would manage this. She started getting up at 4:30 instead of 5. She took on a saddle repair for Pete Harlow that was not strictly her work, but that she had the skill for. She said yes to a full quilt commission from a woman in Kettle Fork who wanted the thing done in 6 weeks, which was ambitious. She held the thread. The cold deepened in the second week of November, and the kind of cold Wyoming Territory produces when it wants to remind you it has been here considerably longer than you have. The temperatures went below freezing at night. The days not much better, and the first real snow came in and stayed. In the second week of November, the stove in Nora's workroom stopped drawing correctly. She had cleaned the flue herself in October and had been fine, but something had shifted in the first hard freeze, and now the smoke backed into the room when she opened the firebox door. She sat at her table in her coat and both her working shawls and held her hands near the lamp between seams to keep the feeling in her fingers. She had spoken to Dooley about it twice. He said he would look at it. He had not. She was in the middle of the kettle fork quilt on a Thursday morning when she heard boots on the outside stairs. Not Dooley's boots. These were measured and deliberate. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.